So welcome to my first section of statistics, my first video on statistics here. And we're going to start with descriptive statistics. I'll talk about that in a minute. And we're going to look at ways to describe data with graphs, and then in the next chapter with numbers. So this chapter is mainly going to be about how to describe data with graphs. But before we get to that, we have to talk about types of data. Here's where we're going to have to lay some of the foundation of the terminology that we use in statistics. So there's going to be quite a bit of vocabulary here in this first section. Okay. So first of all, a lot of words here. What is statistics? Well, we say it's the science of data. So I'm going to have to tell you what data is here in a minute. But statistics is the science of data. It involves collecting, organizing, analyzing, and interpreting data. And within statistics, we're going to see in this class, we talk about two different types of statistics. At the beginning, we're going to talk about descriptive statistics, and then for a large part of the semester, we're going to talk about inferential statistics, which is an extremely useful application of statistics. But I think about it, if you have a set of data and that's your complete set of data and you want to describe it, tell people numerically, graphically what's going on in that set of data, we call that descriptive statistics. So organizing and summarizing data is called descriptive statistics. Inferential, though, to think of the difference here, you have a larger population, like maybe it's the entire United States, and you want to know something about the millions and millions of people in the United States, but you don't want to collect data from every single one of them, so you do what we call random sampling, and you take smaller samples, and from your sample you try to infer information about the larger population. So that's a lot of what we do in statistics. When you hear about political polls, things like that, we're doing inferential statistics, which I say is going to be a big, huge part of this class, but we're going to start with descriptive statistics. When we do inferential statistics, all that's based on random sampling and probability models, so we have to talk a little bit about probability in this class, even though it's mainly statistics. But probability is just the branch of mathematics that studies chance and random events. Let's see some more terminology, working my way up to data here, okay? But in order to understand data, you have to start with individuals, which I say here is not necessarily a person, that's just the terminology we use in statistics. You could be studying, say you're studying cars, okay? The individuals could be your individual cars, and your variable could be the color of the car, the make, the model, whether it's a truck, a car, a van, okay? So the individuals are just the individual objects, the smallest objects that you're studying there. And then the variable would be the different characteristics that you're looking at. And then the data are the actual values that they take on. If you're looking at make and model, is it a Ford Ranger, Toyota RAV4? Those are two different variables there in some of the possible data. We're going to talk about quantitative versus categorical. Quantitative data, how many miles you drove, things like that have numerical values. The actual numbers are the data. And that's what statistics is, it's studying data. So example 1, if we collect from each member of this class the average number of hours that he or she sleeps each night. So if we were actually in the classroom doing this, I might ask each of you to write down what's on average, if you just had to guess, what's the average number of hours you sleep per night. You would give me numbers like 2, 10, 8, 6. And so the individuals would actually be you all, the members of the class. And the variable would be average number, that variable, the average number of hours of sleep per night. The data would be the actual numbers, the 2, the 10, the 6, 8. That would be the data. So data, it can be numerical, quantitative, or categorical, we're going to talk about in a minute. It may take on verbal descriptions, but your variable is the characteristic, and then the data are just the actual values that it takes on. So there are two types of variables that we look at. Our data can come in two different types. We can either have numerical quantitative data or more verbal categorical data. Okay? So first of all, I have here quantitative. These are things you can count and measure. And if you want to think about, sometimes it can be a little tricky. Like if you look at room numbers, like I'm in room 210 or I'm in room 219, I'm not going to average those two numbers together. It doesn't make sense to use math on those. Those are just labels if I'm talking about room numbers. True quantitative variables, it makes sense to do math on them, to add them, subtract them, average across the individuals. Okay? So some examples, you could think of infinitely many of these, but how tall you are, 72 inches, 6 feet. Your age, 18, 20, 40, 50, those are numbers. Your blood cholesterol level, 210, whatever they are. I don't even know what good cholesterol numbers are, but your blood cholesterol levels are measured in numbers. The number of credit cards you own, 0, 1, 2, 15, these are all numbers, okay? Categorical, they may have numerical labels, but they're not really numbers. They're just different categories that you fall into. And there, all you can do is count how many falls into each category, or say there's a certain proportion or percent of individuals in each category. Like 52% of this class is female, 48% male, or whatever it may be, just for example. Some other examples, your blood type. You're either A, B, or O. You fall into one of those 4 categories. Your hair color, blonde, brunette, redhead. You have verbal descriptions there. You fall into those categories. Your ethnicity. Whether or not you paid income tax or not last year, that's a yes or no question. Any yes or no question, you either fall into the yes or the no response. So that's categorical. Okay. And here's an example that I always do in class. And in class, I would give you some time to think about it and get answers from the students. So what I would say here is maybe think about this, pause the video, and try to think of some on your own. I'll give some examples in the video here. And it's not an exhaustive list. You could come up with all sorts of things here, but you're preparing to study the television viewing habits of college students. Describe 2 categorical variables and 2 quantitative variables that you might measure for each student. Okay? Again, endless possibilities here. So again, maybe think of some on your own, but what are some categorical variables you could study? When I ask classes, usually the first thing they throw out is what we might call the genre. Do you like drama? Do you like horror? Do you like comedy? That would be a categorical variable. You could look at the types of shows people watch. This one became more popular as we now have all these different ways to stream things. I just called it here provider. Do you use Netflix? Do you use Amazon Prime? Do you use over-the-air cable? Different ways that you get your TV programs. And this one, I don't know the perfect word to use for this, but I'm calling it your class, whether you're freshman, sophomore, junior, or senior. Okay, if you're studying college students, you may want to look separately at your underclassmen versus upperclassmen, different grade levels. Okay, we don't really call them grade levels, I think, in college, but I think we call them your class, whether you're freshman, sophomore, junior, or senior. Okay. Again, that's not an exhaustive list, but those are some that I could come up with. Quantitative. Usually the first one people throw out is how many hours do you watch? Do you watch 10 hours of TV a week? Do you watch 1 hour a day? Different quantitative ways to measure that. Okay. Sometimes it takes a little longer to get another one, but one that I would think of if you're doing a study of college students, you may want to relate that to GPA. If you watch too much TV or you're not studying enough or something. But GPA is a numerical value, 4.0, 3.5, 2.0, whatever. Those are quantitative variables. So categorical, when you look at the values, they're actually categories, labels, words. You fall into different categories. Quantitative, they're numbers, and they are actual mathematical numbers that it would make sense to do computations with. What's the average GPA of the freshman class at the University of North Georgia? I can do numerical computations. What's the average number of hours watched per week by the people in this class? Okay?